Hello. Now, some time ago, what's going on here? Some time ago, I said that I would do another video for you about the essay and about how to critically analyse the article that that was under your analysis, the one of the three that you were doing. I've thought about this, and I think the best way that I can help make this more clear to you is to give you an example. So that's what I'm going to do in this video, is that I'm going to take an article and I'm going to quickly, and this will only be 10 minutes or so, I think, I will very quickly run through how I would go about analysing the article and how I would write my response. So I'll quickly tell you what I would write in each of the three sections. Okay. So the article that I'm going to be looking at is this one, which is Story Stocks Tell Tall Tales. Now, you can access the actual article one of three ways. I'll either pin a comment to below the video in the comment section on the YouTube video. You can also access the slides, which will be on Blackboard, and if you just click the banner, see the banner there? What am I doing? There. The banner is that you will be able to just click the headline there, and that's a link, and that will take you to the article itself. Or you can just Google it. If you just Google Story Stocks Tell Tall Tales, it'll pop up and it'll send you to the article in the Financial Times. But what I suggest that you read it first before we go much further. So pause the video, go and read the article. It won't take you long, it's very short. See you in a bit. Right, welcome back. I told you it was short, didn't I? So what are we going to do with this article then? How are we going to approach this? Okay, so remember the actual assignment asks you to write a paper in three parts, doesn't it? Okay, well, the first part is a description. So the description, I think, is pretty straightforward here, isn't it, really? As the article really talks about this appearance of these things that they call story stocks. So really the article, and you could pick out any bits that you wanted to that would be in it, and I'd pick out the various salient points that the author is making about the story stocks. I'd talk about the way that he's defined the story stocks in terms of PE ratios, but also against the sort of like the capex of it. But ultimately is that in the last bit, I would draw attention to the fact that the author is suggesting that stocks are being valued in ways that are unconventional or don't fall into line with the way that we would normally expect stocks to be valued. In other words, the stock is being valued away from the fundamentals of the performance of the actual firms themselves. So the article, therefore, is about the functioning of stock markets. Now, when you address one of your three articles, whether it be about greedflation or whether it be about public debt or whether it be about water companies and PE, you really want to, at the end of your first section, this description section, bring it together and say that basically the paper is about, the article is about X, and this is what I'm going to tackle. So by me saying that this is about the functioning of stock markets, that leads me, therefore, very straightforwardly onto the next section, which is section 2. So in section 2 is a literature review. So for the avoidance of doubt, if you don't know what I mean by a literature review, go and read articles from any of the academic journals, okay? I will post a literature review with the video of a literature review on leadership, all right? So I'll give you an idea about what a literature review looks like. Now, your literature review is only going to be so many words. It can't be a massive one. So you're going to have to focus it. So for this article, I would focus my literature review on the functioning of stock markets. So what would I include therefore? Well, I would include articles that I've drawn from that are about the efficient markets, the efficient function of the markets. Now, there's lots of different perspectives that you could use here, but broadly, I'm going to cover some of the articles in that, and I would be looking at, or I would be focusing on specifically on Eugene Fama's work on efficient market hypothesis. So I would look to some of the theoretical antecedents that have led up to Fama's view on efficient markets, and then I would suggest that there's been some criticism of markets and the efficient market hypothesis, and I would draw attention to those, and I would write those. I would then cover those, the criticisms of efficient markets. Now, what we're therefore looking at is in terms of so if you imagine that the efficient markets has been the hypothesis, if you like, or a thesis. This is the thesis, is that markets work efficiently. Is that the antithesis, the opposite of it? Remember, is that we're being critical. Is to cover the literature that is against or stands opposed to the notion of efficient markets. And I would look specifically at things like narrative-driven markets. And I would focus specifically on the work of Keynes, and that the markets are about the most beautiful. And how do we decide which are the most beautiful? And I would draw attention to things like Circuits of Capital, Nigel Thrift. And I possibly might go a little bit further than that, but that's because of the fact that I've got a little bit more understanding about how markets can be drawn narratively. And I might look at the works of, say, Jean Calon. I might look at Lanes, but you would therefore do some research on alternative theories to markets and the way that markets function. So that would be my literature review. My literature review. First part would be about markets are efficient. Then I would say that there are some criticisms in this, and here is alternative perspectives that might help us understand. Now, what I'm doing here is I say it's a focused literature review. So you haven't got that many words, so you can't cover everything within the course that you think is applicable to that article. So I would go deep. Yeah. What I mean by that is that don't just look at one paper. Look at the theoretic. How did he get there? How have we got to this particular view? So you trace the history, if you like, of the papers up to current views. Now, when you start to look at your papers, the three that you've covered, broadly speaking, is that one's on government debt. Well, then that would be an interesting sort of collection of literature about how governments create debt, about bond markets, and about limitations on bond markets, which you might draw attention to, sort of the bond markets collapsing as a consequence of government action, and all that sort of stuff. So that would be my area of focus. On greedflation, I'll be looking at issues of inflation, causes of inflation, and then I might suggest that an alternative view on inflation might well be that firms are padding their own margins in order to be able to pay back the shareholders, and so therefore I could draw attention to the shareholder value literatures as well. And on the final one, which is the one on water, I think is the most difficult one because it's areas that we've not specifically covered, but nevertheless, you're all canny enough to be able to work it out. I would draw attention to private equity firms, and what private equity firms are, and what they're supposed to do, and what they really do. Now, private equity firms are pioneers. They're an innovation that saw the firm itself as being a financial asset that could be traded. Yeah, now, in theory, they're supposed to make the firm more efficient so that they become more sellable. But what they do in practice is they pad in a lot of cases, is they pad out the actual the actual firm itself with loads of debt, the debt is then used to pay back the private equity investors, and the firm is left with a lot of debt. Now, I've covered those briefly. That's just to give you an indication. I'm not telling you specifically, as I can't do that, but that's just to give you an indication of some of the literature that I would cover. So I'm not covering, or trying to cover, a whole range of different topics that we've covered in the literature, in the lecture series. Focus it down and then draw in all of those different references and papers and create within your literature review a sense of a thesis and an antithesis, a sense of that one side of the literature says this, but there are these opposing sides of the literature as well. And then in the third part, we look through this in order to be able to write our critical review. So let's go back to Story Stocks Tell Tall Tales. A bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Is that what evidence can I find that supports both of the propositions? So can I find evidence that supports markets are efficient? Now, within the literature, within the actual article, it says, it draws attention to some companies that are story stocks, but there's only a small number of them. Well, that does mean, therefore, that there are more that are not story stocks. Well, how are they behaving? What do they look like? Now, it might well be that when I look at it, it might well be that the story stocks are actually creating more of the value within the stock market than non-story stocks. Yeah. So that would be evidence that I could collect in support of my arguments that I'm trying to make here. I would also, I'd want to draw attention to some of the story stocks, and I might well present empirical evidence about stock market growth. Now, these figures are taken from the time that the article was written. If you look at the date of the article, it's dated now, so it won't be the same as it is now. But nevertheless, you can see that these firms, Tesla, Snapchat, Netflix, Twitter, are firms with highly increasing returns. Stock prices are going up and up and up and up. But at the time of me putting this together, or the date of these charts, not one of these firms made any money. So there you go. There's examples there of stocks that are based upon something which is not the fundamentals. Because why would you buy a stock that's not producing the economic fundamentals? Well, because of the fact it's the value of the stock that's the most important thing. What's driving the stock? Well, people talking it up. It's the new beautiful in the market. I might also want to look at meme stocks as an example. Now, meme stocks, clearly, in this example here, which I'm giving you, which is GameStop and Robinhood, clearly this stock, GameStop, was not driven by its economic fundamentals. It's a crappy brick-based store that sells old-fashioned games. But look at the growth in its stock. Well, what was happening there? So what I'm doing here is I'm bringing this evidence together, therefore, in order to be able to try and support the propositions that I've outlined, the theoretical propositions that I've outlined in part 2. So what evidence can I find that supports both propositions? I'd introduce the relevant evidence, discuss it, synthesize it. What does that mean? Well, I've got evidence that says there is evidence to say that some stocks work based on economic fundamentals. There are other stocks that don't, these that are in support of this notion of story stocks. I would then discuss them, synthesize them. I bring the 2 points together within my particular part of my paper. And then I'd make a conclusion on the basis of the evidence. And my conclusion in this particular case would be that the stock markets have been growing at a rate that is high, it's much faster than the underlying economy itself. So something else is going on there. And on that basis, it would seem to be some evidence to suggest that there's evidence in support of the notions of the story stocks, which in turn is also evidence for something that's going on in stock markets, which is more to do with just efficient market efficient market hypothesis and price. Yeah, and that's all you can say. That's what you don't need to say anything more definitive than that, but do make a conclusion. Yeah. Well, I said this was only going to take 10 minutes. It's taken me 15 minutes already, isn't it? So that's how I would approach this paper. Yeah. So I urge you to read the paper, have a think about it, and then go back to your articles that you're looking at as well. Be very clear about what you think it's about. Focus your literature review, and then look for evidence. Look at a lens of how you can explain the article through the literature, critique the article, and look at bringing in supporting evidence in order to be able to help you. Now, as I've said before, I'm more than happy to receive plans. I've had a couple from a couple of you, obviously, and they've been very good. So have courage, have confidence in your own abilities to be able to write these and to write these well, because I'm very confident that you will. All right, but by all means, send them to me, and I'm happy to critique them, and I'm happy to get back to you, and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as I possibly can do. Okay. Good luck.